video, I'm talking about some of my favorite crystal tools for divination with your crystals. Particularly, I'm going to be talking about scrying divination, which is the art of sort of gazing into your crystals. So I am super excited to talk about this. We are going to focus on three main tools in this video: crystal balls, obsidian mirrors, and crystal bowls, which can all be used in different ways for scrying divination. I'll be releasing a brand new podcast about this tomorrow. That'll be Thursday, April 4th, at about 1 o'clock p.m. Central Time. So I have included a link pinned here in the comments so that you can check out our podcast. You can just head to loveandlightschool.com/listen to subscribe to the show and check out our upcoming episodes. So let's go ahead and dive in and talk a little bit about divination with crystals. So first, what is divination? Divination is sort of the art of seeking knowledge or guidance or wisdom from your inner knowing, usually through the use of some sort of tool, some sort of external thing that you can connect with, whether that be tarot or oracle cards, a pendulum, a crystal ball, anything like that. Scrying in particular is a specific type of divination that uses different tools that can be gazed at to sort of pull through these symbols or shapes or different meanings, things that we're sort of looking for, usually visually. There are so many different things that can be used for scrying, like the flame of a candle, the clouds, reflections in a surface of water, and so many other types of scrying. But in this video, I'm going to explore three different crystal scrying tools because we love to incorporate our crystals into what we do here, because I think that these are really helpful for working with for guidance, but might be a little intimidating to a lot of people. If you're watching right now, if you've ever had that where, you're really interested in maybe the idea of working with a crystal ball or, other divination tools, maybe a crystal pendulum, an obsidian mirror, but maybe you don't feel super confident, you feel a little stuck because you don't quite know how to work with it, I'm going to give you a quick overview of how to work with any crystal scrying tool, a little step-by-step system. But I also want to explore these three tools in depth because I want to give you a good background and information and help you feel a little bit more confident when it comes to choosing these, finding the right thing to work with for yourself, that sort of thing. But before we dig into that, I just want to say, working with these crystal scrying tools is a really powerful experience. And in general, and we'll talk about each tool more specifically in a minute, but in general, these crystal scrying tools are excellent for scrying divination because they have this amazingly reflective surface, or they allow us to sort of look within to find some of that wisdom and guidance. This is a great way to help boost your intuition, so working on developing that connection you have with your intuition, to sort of fill in the gaps in your knowledge. So a lot of times if you have a big decision coming up, you need more information about something before you sort of make up your mind, we only have a limited amount of facts, right? And we can sort of logically think through different scenarios and try and plan and make the best decisions that we can, but our intuition really helps us fill in those gaps in our knowledge. So it's sort of about bringing that, knowledge and reason together with our intuition, with that inner knowing, that gut feeling, that intuitive guidance, so that they work together to allow us to make decisions and do things in our life in a really practical way, which I think is really important. So I also want to just preface this by saying working with crystals for divination takes a lot of practice and it takes a lot of patience. So this might not be something that you get something super meaningful out of the first time you try. Maybe you will, and that's fantastic. But don't get discouraged if it takes you a little time to sort of start to connect with your tools. Our crystals are something that we have to build relationship with. We have to understand how they work. They have to understand how we work. So coming to them with an open mind and a really good intention sort of set on things, I think is really useful for just being in the space of receiving and keeping in mind that it requires this relationship building to sort of get things going. So here are a few of my favorite crystal tools and techniques to help you get going with your crystal divination practice. So first, I want to talk about crystallomancy. Crystallomancy is the art of scrying with crystal tools, typically with a crystal ball. And I have a beautiful quartz sphere here. This is a quartz crystal ball. And you can see it's a natural crystal ball. It has lots of internal fissures, fractures, all kind of things going on in here. It's super reflective. It catches the light really well. This nice little stand that I like to use with it. This is a pretty large size natural crystal ball. You can work with any size sphere, and we'll talk about this a little bit when it comes to choosing your divination tools, but even something small like this will work. Might be a little bit more challenging, but it will absolutely work. Something this size is usually pretty large, so find something that sort of works with your budget, that is affordable and accessible. And I also want to just let you know, for all of the tools that we're going to talk about today, I'm going to offer some suggestions for affordable substitutes also, because sometimes these divination tools get to be a little bit expensive. So crystallomancy, as I mentioned, is the art of gazing into a reflective crystal surface of some sort, in this case, a crystal ball, to receive this guidance and wisdom from the images that are revealed from within the sphere. So the energy of a sphere or a crystal ball represents wholeness, completion, infinite possibility. So spheres make excellent tools for sort of tapping into that intuitive guidance. Humans have been practicing the art of crystallomancy, also called crystal ball reading, for hundreds, if not thousands of years. One of the most famous crystallomancers, who was named John Dee, was advisor to Queen Elizabeth I, and Dee practiced his art all the way back in the 16th century. But people sort of still know him today because he was said to offer very wise counsel. He was said to be able to make these amazing predictions and provide really, really good guidance to the queen. So he relied upon different crystal scrying tools, including a crystal ball and an obsidian mirror, which we're going to talk about shortly, to reveal these sort of hidden truths and offer this really profound guidance. Kind of made a name for himself doing that. The British Museum actually displays John Dee's tools on display in the museum, so you can actually see some of these things, and I have been there, and in the blog post that I'm going to release tomorrow over at loveandlightschool.com, you'll actually be able to see a photo of John Dee's actual crystal tools, going again all the way back to the 15th century, which is pretty cool. Or excuse me, 16th century. So let's talk about selecting a crystal ball. Before we get into how to work with it, anything like that, your first step would be to get one, right? So let's kind of break down some things that you need to consider. When you're choosing a crystal ball to work with for scrying, now there are lots of different ways to work with crystal balls. We're not going to go into all those, but you can work with them for massage. They're a great shape to work with in a crystal grid to represent wholeness. The energy emanates sort of equally out in all directions. There are lots of different uses for crystal spheres, but when it's specifically for scrying or crystallomancy, the art of gazing into the crystal ball, it's important to select one that's going to allow you to see sort of inside the crystal, into the depths of the crystal. So quartz-based minerals like clear quartz or smoky quartz, amethyst, anything like that that's quartz-based are typically going to work great for this, not only because they are transparent or translucent so you can see into them, into their interior, but also because anything in the quartz family is a great amplifier of energy and will just work really well for helping with your divination practice. There are also some more affordable stones that you can work with, because sometimes The clear quartz ones or anything in the quartz family are a little bit more expensive. So you can get things like calcite, fluorite that you can still see into, and those work fine. My personal preference is clear quartz, but there are no right or wrongs here. Just find something that works for you. But these transparent to translucent stones really let you gaze into the sphere, explore its sort of inner landscape to see any symbols or images that appear or sort of reveal themselves to you from the stone's fissures and fractures and inclusions and all those little things that help us really see, into the crystal ball, that let us see what's going on inside there. So more opaque stones, meaning ones you can't see through, like jaspers, are really common in a sphere shape because remember, there are lots of reasons we might want to work with a crystal ball. But for scrying, those opaque stones aren't really recommended because you can just see the surface of the stone. You can't see into the interior, and it's really hard to sort of see anything. So one exception to this usually is black obsidian. Sometimes black obsidian crystal balls are used for scrying in a very similar way to obsidian mirrors, which we're going to talk about next. So just know that that's kind of an exception to the rule. Some people like to have like a quartz sphere and an obsidian sphere. I really like the quartz sphere and the mirror of obsidian. So we'll cover that in more detail coming up in a second here. But just to kind of show you what I mean between the difference in a opaque stone versus a transparent or translucent stone. Let's say you had a stone like unakite, and here I have a small unakite sphere, which is opaque. You can't see through it. It's a combination of green epidote and peach feldspar. Let's compare that to something like ametrine, which is transparent, translucent. This is a combo of amethyst and citrine, and I'm just trying to make my video a little bit bigger on my end here. There we go, so I can make sure it's showing up clearly for you. So there is that ametrine, and look how you can see inside of that crystal. Whereas with the unakite, it's just opaque. You can't see into the interior. So you always want to go with something that's a little bit more transparent or translucent. That will really help the process and makes it so much easier to see those symbols and images within the sphere. So it's also important to note here that a lot of the things that you'll find available for sale, especially like online, that are called crystal balls, like if you just look up crystal ball or even quartz crystal ball, a lot of those are actually just glass. If you see those spheres that are flawlessly clear, I mean, they're perfectly clear and there's nothing going on inside them, totally clear, those are often reconstituted quartz. Sometimes they'll be called natural reconstituted quartz or natural recon quartz. There's no such thing. That's sort of a contradiction. It just doesn't really exist. So if you have a perfect, flawlessly clear crystal ball, which is what a lot of folks think you need for scrying, it's actually really hard to work with, especially for beginners, because there's no like internal landscape, there's no backdrop to catch your attention to help you focus and pull forward those symbols or images. So has anyone seen these online, these sort of like crystal balls that are perfect, flawless in every way? These are really common, and I think that so often we think this is what we need to work with for scrying because in a lot of popular culture references, these are the crystal balls that are shown in every, like anything from a comic strip to a feature film. You'll see that like perfectly flawless crystal ball that's supposed to be really mystical. These are really hard to work with. And Geraldine says, yes, I've seen them. So this is like what is always sort of depicted or portrayed. But they're so hard for beginners to work with. So first and foremost, because they're not natural, they're not going to have the same energy as a natural quartz crystal. So I would take one of these with all of its little imperfections any day of the week over one of those perfect, flawless ones. And second, in addition to them not being natural, It's all those inclusions, all those fissures and fractures and rainbows and things that are happening in there that give our subconscious and our intuition the sort of space and backdrop to project those images or symbols for us to pick up on with our conscious mind. So this is really important because it actually makes the scrying process super simple. It makes it much easier than that sort of blank slate with nothing going on. So I promised you affordable alternatives to crystal balls. So crystal balls can be expensive, especially like a clear quartz one. They're probably one of the more pricey ones. But you can even work with a small tumbled stone as long as it's relatively rounded. That will work for scrying. It's a little harder because your canvas, so to speak, that you're looking into is a little smaller, but it will work. A palm stone would also be fine. You could also work with something like a dome shape. So I have this piece here that's a dome. The bottom is sort of rough and natural, and then it's flat-ish on the bottom, and then there's this sort of dome shape. But when I say like this is all about looking into that interior landscape of the crystal, look how much there is to see in here. So it doesn't have to be a perfect sphere because those do get pretty expensive. So something like this was much more affordable, but really offers a great tool for scrying divination. When I was looking in here the other day, one of the things that I saw was a panda, which was really weird for me. I'm like not particularly into like pandas, but that's what I saw. So you can definitely, work with something like this. And again, it doesn't have to be this large. It can be small. That's totally fine. So that is an option for you. And another thing that you can work with if you have one handy, although these can be a little pricey too, just depending, but if you already have one, is you can work with the back of a crystal skull. So crystal skulls, their shape in general is innately about, wisdom, knowledge, sometimes intuition, right? Because it's like the shape of a human head. So here with the crystal skull, if you use the back side of the skull, it works great for scrying divination. And this was a technique that was taught to me by one of my very early crystal teachers named Dale Walker, who founded the Crystal Awareness Institute. And he is sadly no longer with us, but I actually got this little skull from him, and this was a technique that he sort of pioneered, was scrying in the back of the crystal skull, almost like a crystal ball. And that technique works really well. So if you already have a crystal skull and you want to work with that instead of investing in a crystal ball, that is totally fine too. In addition to just like a regular old tumbled stone, there's also a shape that's called a seer stone. It's also called riverbed quartz, dragon egg, emu egg. It has lots of different names, but it looks like this. And I just have a little one here. It is a little stone, and these, oh, sorry, let me see if I can get that to focus. It's often made out of clear quartz, sometimes amethyst, sometimes rose quartz, but it's like a tumbled stone that's been sandblasted, so it has this rough, sort of cloudy appearance on the outside, and then they cut one face and polish it so it's like a little window. So now you have this sandblasted exterior, which provides a great backdrop for your scrying. Oh, I'm too close, I think. Apologies, there we go. Provides that backdrop, and you gaze into the interior of the cut window, and it gives you a sort of space to scry, to look into, to gaze into. These are super affordable. They're usually like $5 or less, depending on the size of them. They work great as scrying tools, and they're pretty readily available. Now, I will tell you, I mentioned that they come in several different types of stones, including amethyst and rose quartz. Rose quartz is pretty opaque, even though it's a little translucent. It can be very hard to scry in still, so I wouldn't recommend that. But I have seen them in amethyst and smoky quartz as well. Sometimes they're a little bit better quality and they have a bit more clarity to them. Those would be preferable over ones that are sort of cloudy or milky because they're just too hard to see into the surface. So if you just look literally into the surface of the stone, if you can see into it, it's going to be great for scrying. If you can't really, it might not be the best tool, but just look around and you will find one that's pretty clear, and you just gaze right into that window. And again, we'll talk more about the how-tos in just a minute. Next, there are obsidian mirrors, and these come in lots of different sizes. About the smallest I've seen are about maybe 2 inches across, and I've seen some as big as 12 inches across. This one's maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 inches. But here you can see it's just a flat, round obsidian disc. And like I mentioned, this is like very similar to what John Dee would have used. So this has been in use for, at least hundreds of years, these obsidian mirrors, which are very, very popular for scrying. So these are just made by polishing these thin slices of obsidian into a really, really glassy surface. They're highly reflective, and they provide this sort of gateway into the realm of subconscious, just like any of these scrying tools do. But particularly with the obsidian, it connects to your inner world, it connects to your shadow side, it connects to your subconscious. And these give you the ability to really look at yourself, to sort of reflect on your life path, your behavior, your identity. So if your scrying question, or the reason for your scrying, the reason for your searching or seeking this information has to do with any of those things, then obsidian mirrors can be fantastic to work with. And yes, you can absolutely use obsidian spheres. I kind of talked about those a little bit in the quartz crystal ball section, but instead of a mirror, an obsidian sphere can work very well. It's a little different because of the curved surface. Sometimes those reflections on the surface are a little distorted. That can work in your favor for scrying because you don't see the reflection of things quite so literally. But the way that I like to work with these is a little different. We don't usually gaze sort of directly into the sphere. It's a little different, which I'll explain again in a moment. So these are like really revered for their connection to the other world, the underworld, the spirit realm. And in the last few years, I feel like these obsidian scrying mirrors have really gained in popularity, but they have long, long, long been around. So again, John Dee, that famous crystallomancer, advisor to Queen Elizabeth I, worked with one of these in his scrying practice. If you want to see the one that's on display in the British Museum, again, head over to my website tomorrow, loveandlightschool.com, and I'll have pictures from my visit there a few years ago. And by gazing into these obsidian mirrors, you can receive messages from your intuition, your guides, your ancestors, because obsidian is also great for ancestor connection and work. So these are great tools, but again, they can be pricey. So let's talk affordable alternatives. Sometimes an obsidian sphere can be a lot more affordable. It's definitely more affordable than clear quartz. So you could get an obsidian sphere like the same size as this quartz sphere for maybe like half to 2/3 of the price of quartz. So you have quite a big cost saving, just depending on what style of divination you like. I personally find it a little more difficult to scry with obsidian as opposed to clear quartz. That interior sort of landscape of the quartz really helps me sort of see things inside of there without having to have it come quite so much from within me. I get to actually pick it out within the crystal based on the structure that's already there, which is I find really, really useful. But some people definitely prefer the darker surface of the obsidian. So this is about, exploring, experimenting, and find out what really works well for you. So there's also, for a more affordable alternative other than the sphere, which are usually a lot less than the mirrors. For some reason, these mirrors can be pretty pricey. You can also use a black mirror. So black mirrors have a long history of use, at least to my knowledge, in like modern paganism as tools for scrying divination. So on a regular glass mirror, you're going to have your pane of glass and they have a metallic silver coating on the back so that when you look through, you're seeing that reflection. In a black mirror, you have that pane of glass and they're painted black on the back side instead. So they have a black backing and that creates sort of the same or similar surface to the obsidian mirror. So it creates that black reflective surface that lets you see it. So obviously, crystal practitioners usually prefer the obsidian so that they're connecting more with natural stone in their practice. But the black mirrors can be much more accessible, especially financially. So if that's something that you would prefer, based on affordability, then by all means give it a try. Also, if you would like to stick with natural stone and a obsidian mirror or even a obsidian sphere or crystal ball is still out of your price range, you can work with an obsidian tumbled stone. You can work with a palm stone of obsidian. Those are usually very, very affordable because they don't take quite the precision to sort of polish them up like the spheres or the mirrors do. So they're usually a lot more affordable. And they can work just as well. So those work great. And let's see here. Okay, so next, and I see a couple questions, which I actually will touch on when we get into the how to do your scrying portion. So I promise those are coming up. The last tool I want to talk about, in addition to the crystal ball and the obsidian mirror, which are probably two of the most common, are crystal bowls. And I actually left my bowl sitting over on my altar because I was working with it yesterday. So let me grab that quickly. Here it is. You can get a stone or crystal bowl made out of lots of different materials. Anything that's in a bowl shape makes it perfect for scrying, especially when you add a little bit of water. I find that a dark colored bowl, relatively flat shape, so nice and wide and flat, tends to work best for this. So this one here is just made of soapstone, which is also called steatite. It's relatively inexpensive compared to if you had a bowl carved out of like quartz or agate or something like that, which are usually small and quite expensive and usually very thin. I like this one because it's really thick and durable. I can take it outside if I want, which I do frequently, so I really personally like this. But a dark colored, relatively flat sort of basin or bowl works best for this. When you're choosing a crystal bowl, one important thing to think about is what type of stone it is, because energetically, the properties of that stone are sort of going to influence a little bit the scrying divination that you're doing, right? So the reason that we add water to these is because it gives us that nice reflective surface to scry in. So when you're working with your stone bowl, instead of looking right into the bowl, you just add some water and then you're gazing into the reflective surface of that water. And there's a bit of depth created, just in, the water itself there, the volume that it's taking up inside of the bowl. But we need to consider the properties of the type of bowl that we're working with. So I got this black soapstone, not only because it was super affordable and much more within my budget, but because it's really about doing that inner work. And a lot of my divination work isn't so much like fortune telling. It's really about personal exploration, self-exploration, understanding myself more, seeking answers, right? And so the black soapstone is really conducive to that work and super affordable. But think about choosing stones, if you can, that maybe do that same thing like I just mentioned. That's why I chose mine. Or something that enhances your intuition or could enhance your divination practice, facilitate mental clarity. There are lots of different things that you could sort of think of that you might really want out of a crystal scrying tool, and choosing a crystal bowl that sort of aligns with that could be really helpful. So affordable alternatives to crystal bowls, first and foremost, the black soapstone. I think it's probably one of the more affordable materials out there, and it gives you that great bowl shape. It is perfect for multi-purpose. You can use it for little offerings on your altar. You can use it for scrying, whatever you want. So I really recommend having one of these if you're doing some more in-depth crystal work. But a super affordable alternative that most people don't ever talk about is using any bowl at all, even if it's not a crystal bowl. It could just be a bowl from your kitchen, right? And instead, the way that you bring the crystal energy into that is the water that you're adding to the bowl. So you can make a gem water or crystal essence or elixir and put that in your bowl for scrying, and that is where the crystal energy comes in. So maybe you have your own specific scrying blend that you want to make up. Maybe it has some amethyst for intuition, some lapis for connection with divine guidance, universal guidance and wisdom. Maybe it has some obsidian for ancestral guidance and wisdom, and all these things are coming together to charge your water. Maybe you make that with moon water, maybe you just make a regular crystal essence or elixir, however you want to do it. And I have great information on this over on my website at loveandlightschool.com/blog. There are a couple different articles. There's one about creating a crystal elixir for shadow work scrying. There's one about how to create crystal elixirs safely, which goes through the step-by-step process of creating your own gem waters or crystal elixirs. Some of the information in that article won't apply to this because you're not ingesting it, so you don't need to worry as much about the safety that way since you won't be drinking it. You're going to be using it for scrying, which if you have never created an essence or an elixir before, this is a great place to start because it's not as big of a deal if you make a little bit of a mistake, you know what I mean? Because you're just using it here, you're not drinking it at all. So definitely check those articles out for some more step-by-step instructions. But this is a super affordable way to bring crystal energy into your scrying practice. And I love scrying with water in a bowl. Again, this can just be a regular bowl from your kitchen if you're using your crystal or gem water for your scrying liquid, because water itself has such a deep connection with intuition. It allows us to tap into our intuition. It allows us to tap into our feeling. It lets us sort of get in flow with that energy, to let go of any judgment that we have about what we're sort of picking up on intuitively. It's a beautiful, beautiful element of energy to connect with, and bringing it into this practice is awesome. So this is one of my favorite methods of scrying, probably the one that I go to the most. And just using this sort of tip or trick of adding the crystal elixir or essence to any regular bowl works really well. And again, especially sometimes if the bowl has that dark background, makes it a little bit easier to scry into the basin. But any bowl will work, especially if it's like a clear glass bowl. You don't have a dark colored bowl, you can just put that in front of a dark background, maybe some dark fabric behind it, something like that. That works really well. But if you have a bowl like this one, a crystal or stone bowl, you can still create your own scrying essence to work with in the bowl. That works just fine too. So if you want the step-by-steps for that, it'll be up on my blog tomorrow, loveandlightschool.com. You can check it out. But let's just go through a really brief rundown on how to scry with your crystals. And this will be more or less the same whether you're choosing a crystal ball, an obsidian mirror, or a crystal bowl filled with water. So the first thing you'll need is sort of a dim or darkened space. You don't want it to be like pitch black dark where you can't see anything, but just low light is usually pretty good. And then you can light a candle or have some other source of light. If you're worried about the open flame with a candle, you have safety concerns, work with a night light, work with a small Himalayan salt lamp. Like anything like that is fine as long as it's really low light and your space will still be pretty dim. You want that light source sort of off to one side so that it won't interrupt your like direct field of vision, because you don't want that really bright light in your eyes. You just want it sort of off to your peripheral. Then you want to sort of get into a space where you're ready to do this divination. Center yourself, ground yourself, take some deep breaths, allow your mind to sort of formulate a question if you have one, or to just be open to receiving whatever messages or guidance or wisdom the universe might have for you. And then you're sort of going to start to gaze into your crystal scrying tool. Again, whether that's your crystal ball or your obsidian mirror or the back of a skull or your bowl of water, whatever tool you choose, you're going to sort of start to gaze at it and let your gaze soften. Almost like when you do one of those magic eye puzzles, right? Where you sort of have to let your field of vision go a little bit blurry, a little bit soft. That's sort of what you want. You want to be in that really soft state of focus with your eyes. And just, you can sort of slightly move your crystal tool a little bit until it, something sort of starts to reveal itself, something starts to appear. You may want to adjust your light source so that the light is reflected in whatever surface you're looking at, whether that's, again, your crystal ball or on the surface of your mirror. Sometimes that reflection of the light can sort of spark something, can help you pick up on those symbols or images that are appearing. And just give yourself time and space to sort of let something come through with that softened gaze, the deep breathing, make it a really, an environment that's really conducive to this. So if you want to have some incense lit, if you want to play some soft music that helps you feel a little ethereal, a little mystical, sort of gets you in that space, that can all help this process, because it sort of tells your brain that you're going into this other space, this intuitive space. And I like to do this for whatever type of divination I'm doing, whether it's scrying or stone casting or card reading. This is just an important part of my process, and I'm sure it will probably be helpful for you too, so give that a try. Give yourself plenty of time to allow something to come through, and also know that we all have different intuitive gifts and information can come through in different ways. So even though scrying is predominantly like visual based, right? We're usually looking into our crystal for that symbol, for that shape, for that message to appear. The insight, the wisdom, the knowledge that we receive might come through in a different way. So if you're more clairaudient, maybe gazing into that crystal helps get you in that space where you can receive that message intuitively, but maybe it's not something you're seeing. Maybe it's something you're hearing, a message you're hearing if you're clairaudient. If you're claircognizant, maybe it's an inner knowing. There are so many different ways that we can experience and pick up on energy. So just know that even though with scrying of any form, even though it's your vision that is primarily sort of being engaged in that process, the way in which you receive the information might not come in the form of images or symbols within that scrying tool. And that's okay, right? We all experience energy in different ways. We all pick up on things in different ways. So don't be discouraged if you don't see something. Just be open to whatever sort of comes through. Then after you have given yourself that space, that time to connect, and that energy has sort of come through, you may want to give yourself a little space to reflect on and journal about your experience and what you just received during that divination session. So I like to keep notes of quite a few things in my divination journal, and I've jotted those down in the blog post that's coming out tomorrow. So first record what type of scrying tool you were working with, because you'll find through keeping these records, you have an easier time with some tools versus others. So when I said, I really tend to love working with a quartz crystal ball more than maybe an obsidian mirror, because I find it a little easier to see the symbols and images in a crystal ball. That's something I've learned through practice and through documenting and looking back at all my notes and experiences. So I would really encourage you to do the same thing. So what kind of crystal scrying tool did you work with? What shape was it? Was it smooth, rough, transparent, translucent? Just make detailed notes about your crystal tool here. What kinds of images or symbols did you see, if any? Or did the information come through in a different way? And then how did you interpret this? Were you able to ascribe any meaning toward that right now? Was there something that sort of stood out to you as like, oh, I think this means this, or I think this is related to this experience I had, or to this thing I'm worrying about, or whatever it might be. And also, like, was that a direct response or clear answer to a question that you had? Was it just more about being, open to whatever guidance came through? And then really think about leaving some space in your journal there for how that unfolds in the future, because so often our initial reactions or interpretations of something are, our best guess. But as things sort of play out in our life, as we get more information or new information, it changes the context. And so it changes the way in which we might interpret those initial symbols. So just know that that doesn't mean that you were wrong by any stretch of the imagination. It means like that was your best guess or interpretation at that time. And now that you have new knowledge, new information, new experience, you may look at it in a little different way. And it's interesting to see the things that you were like really spot on and the things that evolved and took shape as things unfolded. So you might also want to jot down your feelings about the practice itself. So not just, about the tool that you worked with and what happened, but how you felt about it. So did you enjoy that particular type of crystal scrying experience? Why or why not? Is it something you would try again? Is it something you feel like you need more practice with before you feel really solid with it? Or did you just really not connect with it at all? Like, all those thoughts are totally valid. So definitely include those. And then you might want to just add any little sketches or doodles or anything like that really helps illustrate something that came up for you, especially if you saw like a little symbol or something like that while you were doing the scrying work. It can really be helpful to draw that, sketch it out. Even if you're like me, you're not a great artist, just get it down on paper so that it's sort of a way to reconnect to that memory of the experience, right? It's kind of like, have you ever had in a dream, like you dreamt something really specific or kind of weird, and you think, well, certainly I'll remember that, and it starts to just fade over time? I find that like the space that you're in when you're doing this type of divination work is very similar to the space that you might be in doing dream work. And so making those little sketches, doodles, that kind of thing can be so useful for helping you reconnect to that initial experience. So do that while it's fresh in your mind, and it will just give you that sort of touch point to remember what it is you saw, what it is you experienced, especially if it's years down the line. So developing your intuition is such an important step to deepening your connection to your crystals, to the world around you, to help you work with your intuition to uncover the meaning behind the messages that you receive, the feelings that you have internally, where your intuition is guiding you in a particular direction. And working with these crystal tools can be so useful for that. So I really would love to encourage you to, have some experiences with them, whether through these 3 tools that I recommended or some of those affordable substitutes. Just get out there and have those experiences. Try working with them. Keep those journal notes. See what you like, what you don't like, and really make a practice for yourself. This is something I think is so incredibly important, and it's, intuition is one of the three key pillars of my crystal immersion method here at the Love and Light School. All of my courses are sort of founded on these pillars. So it's intuition, compassion, and confidence. I think we need all 3 of these things to be really successful with our crystal work. And intuition is such a huge part of this. And letting your intuition sort of inform and guide your practice is incredibly important in all aspects of our crystal work. So, I think this is so important that I've even included it as one of the classes in my crystal healing certification program. There's a class entirely about developing your intuition with crystals, and we explore crystallomancy, which is crystal ball scrying, lithomancy, which is stone casting, pendulum dowsing, crystal cartomancy, so working with tarot and oracle cards with your crystals. We explore these things in depth because these tools can inform our practice so much. Not only do they give us guidance about the world around us, our experiences, what's happening that way, but they're also amazing tools of reflection for our own sort of inner world and what's going on in our inner journey. And enrollment for my CCH program opens really soon. If you're interested in that, definitely head over to crystalhealerschool.com to get on the wait list and find out more about when enrollment opens. And Sarah, I just saw a question from you. Sarah says, if or when we're scrying outside, if the weather is cloudy or overcast or maybe super bright and sunny, are those better or worse times for scrying with obsidian? So I really think anytime it's a little bit more dimly lit, a little bit overcast, it's a bit easier to do this scrying work. When it's really bright and sunny, sometimes it just sort of takes us out of that mystical space. It's not even so much about the way that the light reflects within the tool we're working with or something like that. It can just be a little bit more distracting, a little bit more difficult to connect. But like an overcast gray day, I usually find perfect for any type of scrying work. So whether that's with your crystal ball, with your crystal bowl, with your obsidian mirror, or any of the substitutes, I think that's optimal. That being said, I think it really is about tapping into our intuitive space and connecting with these tools when we need that guidance most. That's most important. So if you really feel moved to or called to sit down and try some scrying with your crystals, you don't have to wait for an overcast day. By all means, just like get in there and try working with your tools and see what happens, what comes up for you. And I hope that this is something that you will enjoy. I hope this is a practice that you'll try out. And I'd love to know if you have a specific crystal divination practice that you really enjoy, whether it's crystal scrying, maybe with one of these types of tools, or something else entirely. Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear what your favorite sort of form of crystal divination is. I do a little bit of everything. I love stone casting. I love working with my tarot and oracle cards, and I really integrate my crystals into that practice as well. But I thought in particular, crystal scrying, I think, is something that is a little bit more intimidating for folks. And so I wanted to just introduce you to some of these different tools, help you get a good feel for what they are, a little bit about their history, and some ways that you can work with them in your practice. You don't have to make it overly complicated. Just try it out following those sort of basic steps for scrying divination. Journal about your experience and give it a bit of time to connect. Remember, this is primarily about relationship developing. So connecting with the same tool quite a few times with that same companion energy can be really supportive of your practice. So give it a chance to sort of build that relationship, build that connection, build an understanding, right, with the crystals that you're working with, and see how your practice begins to develop. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful. Again, if you want to check out this week's podcast episode, it's coming out tomorrow. I have included a comment here to loveandlightschool.com/listen so you can check out our most popular episodes, most recent episodes, and make sure you get subscribed so you never miss a future episode of our podcast. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, crystal blessings.